So, welcome to you people who have come. Oh, hello, Ross.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi. We're gathered here, the little group of us, and this will be going out, just to let you know, this will be going on to YouTube for those people who haven't been able to join us at the moment. And we're just gathered here to talk about Lama, really. How we met him, how we experienced him, what he did in our lives, and I guess the effect that he's had on us and everybody else who has been able to come to the center. Because without Lama having had that energy to come to the center and to have us all, to inspire us all to start centers, then none of this would have happened. As I was preparing or putting together the videos that we would show this afternoon, I started looking again at some of the quite old videos of Lama students who had come to Nepal and gone back to their countries. I see this sometimes as Shenrezi being a very special event, but actually it was happening everywhere. Lama had drawn people to Kopan, and then from Kopan, these people went home and created such strong energy, and it was all Lama working through them, and started centers, started projects, talked to other people who then came to Kopan. It was quite amazing. I'll just turn this off so I can see people. When I met Lama, it was in Kopan in 1973, in April 73, and Nick Rebush and Yeshe Kadro, then Murray Obst, had gone to Nepal, really traveling around, but had met up with the Lamas and had been totally inspired by them. So they wrote out to their friends, and we were traveling in our combi van through Sydney with our baby, got their letter, read it, went to Canberra, got the passport sorted out to have the baby on it, and left. It was that powerful. And when we got to Nepal, we actually walked into Kathmandu, and there were a whole group of people from Melbourne that Nick had also contacted. The strength of what he said, but the energy that came through from what he was experiencing at Kopan at the time was so strong that 12 of us arrived in time for the next course. And that just grew and grew and grew. So, and really, I often thought that Lama had completely set it all up, that he had known all of us in the past, that he'd sent us out into different countries, and then at the right time, he was able to hook everybody back in and have them come and take these teachings at the right time, just at the right time. I mean, the early 70s was exactly when people had gone through a bit of the hippy-dippy things and experimented with a lot of stuff and were ready, looking for something that really was meaningful. So he was just at the perfect time to send people out into the West to start to develop their understanding. And he certainly did. Tom, my husband, went back for another course after that, because having a baby at Kopan and traveling around Nepal with a child who got gastroenteritis 3 times in 2 months was pretty difficult. So we came home and he went back, and it was then that he asked Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche to come out to Australia so that we all wouldn't have to go to Nepal, but they could come to Australia, where hundreds of people were able to come and listen to their teachings in each place that they went to. Oh, my experience of Lama was that he overpowered me. In some ways, he frightened me. He was very powerful. And when he would come and put his arm around me, it was really a little bit too much for me sometimes. The energy was so strong, but also he was able to calm everything. I remember sitting at Kopan when Goody, Rhiannon's earlier name, was really quite ill, and I had no money to get down to the doctors because they weren't changing Australian money. And I sat in the little library at Kopan at the time, just not knowing what to do. And the next thing, Lama was at the door, wanting to know what was wrong, and tapping on the door, coming in, sitting down, talking with me, just in the few words of English that he had. And he gave me some sugar biscuits and said, give these to her, she'll be fine. And the next day she was completely fine. Lama had a remedy for everything, even gastro. And I always felt that he was there as that strength, able to solve everything. I saw him with Nick Rebush's mother one time. She was in the Gompa with us, in the very little Gompa that was originally at Kopan, where 180 people crammed in. Was really a very tight squeeze, and it got really hot and quite claustrophobic. And B was quite old then. Actually, she was probably younger than I am now, but I thought she was quite old. And at one stage, she looked like she was really being a bit overcome by it all. And she stepped up and tried to get over to the window to get out, because there were low windows. And suddenly Lama was there at the window, putting his hand out, helping her out of the window. He was just everywhere and anywhere to help. And that's in a physical sense, but in a mental and emotional sense, he was completely there to help all of us at all times. I could go on rambling for ages, but I've got a letter here from Gary and Chrissy. Well, mostly from Gary, I think, because they're not able to be here today. And although I've sent them a message that they could Zoom in, I'm not sure Gary's up to that. So here's a message from Gary, who was also there. Or was he there at that course? Maybe the next course. I don't remember. Some of the other people from Melbourne were there at that course. I think they might have been in India. Anyway, he was one of the first people at Chenrezig, built a little house at Chenrezig, lived here with his family. Hello, Adam. So this is Gary's words. Firstly, apologies from Chrissy and myself for not being here in person. Saying anything about Lama Yeshe to any of those here today who were fortunate enough to have met him would seem a bit pointless, because aside from any personal anecdotes that individuals may have for us, we all shared a very similar experience with Lama, in that he basically grabbed hold of us and gave us a really good shaking. Times were different back when Lama was around. No one had any of today's technology. There were no phones, no laptops, no internet, no cards, and most of our information came from reading books and talking with interesting people. Most of us already felt that we knew pretty much everything about everything, and consequently had little idea about what was coming our way when we first took teachings from Lama Yeshe. Lama had an amazing ability to see straight through our views and opinions, our alternative lifestyles, appearances, and behavior, and to cut directly into our actual potential and teach us how to be able to do something really useful with our lives. Surely, but not slowly, amidst peals of laughter, Lama Yeshe introduced us to a very different view of reality, taught us about both samsara and the long road he might just change our minds about, and the long road that might just change our minds about how we viewed the world. With great patience and fatherly kindness, along with the help of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he showed us the only way out of this dilemma was to develop kindness, compassion, and wisdom. This way we could slowly change our minds and put our human potential towards meaningful pursuits. It was this resultant energy that had motivated so many young people to work so hard to establish centres all over the world, including here at Shenrezi, where we started with little more than a piece of totally virgin land, along with our newly acquired energy and a few guideline plans from Lama. The results were quite amazing, and with many people inspired to just keep on going with the work required. Some of us are all getting a bit old now, and maybe perhaps being seen by some as a bit yesterday. We certainly do not deny that times have rapidly changed, that technology and red tape have taken over in a very big way, but we still do have to ask ourselves, how can we find the right balance to move forward? Can we develop and grow without continuing to be seriously committed towards doing everything required to keep Shenrezi Institute here for the benefit of others? All of us here today should be aware that we would not be here today without the incredible insight and kindness of Lama and the energy he instilled into his students. We now have a great centre with an excellent teacher, translator, program, and many other facilities. So much to rejoice in, though we do still face many ongoing challenges, especially for those taking us into the future. Reading Lama Yeshe's Big Love books, watching the many videos that are now so easily accessible, and reading his books would certainly not be wasted time. And who knows, it might just be what we need to help us face those future challenges from front on. Both Chrissy and myself would like to sincerely thank the many people who helped turn Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa's advice into reality. Very nice. Completely agree with all of that. Okay, would Venerable Pende like to speak next? Pende?
Hello.
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 You may have to speak up a little bit.
Yeah, I'll come closer. Can I sit down?
Yeah.
Pende had the incredible honor and blessing to have looked after Lama in part of his later years. And I remember him telling me stories about being with Lama at times like that when all the crazy students came to talk to him. It's very wonderful to have somebody that close to him. Okay, Pende, over to you.
Good afternoon. Hello, everybody. I didn't know Lama for a long time. My first ever Dharma course was Kopan 1979. So that was my introduction to Lama. And then I got involved with establishing a Tisha Center in Bendigo. And I'll just tell a couple of anecdotes. Lama was coming to Bendigo, to a Tisha Center, and we were renovating an old church to use as the Gompa. And I remember carrying the ladder around the side of the church as Lama walked down the drive. But we wanted to hold a large festival at Sandhurst Town, the tourist town that the Green family operated. And a bit like up here at the moment, it had been raining non-stop day after day. And we were worried about the weather. And so we mentioned that to Lama. And he said, don't worry. He said, that's my job. And so the next morning it was rainy again. And then we saw Lama walking out in the paddock with an incense burner, chanting. And then magically the clouds parted. And it was a beautiful sunny day the whole day. And then the next day it was pouring with rain again. And I think that happened in a number of places around the world, as it says in Big Love. So another little thing that happened to me there was we had a community meeting with Lama, and we were all sitting around the table, and I wanted to ask him a personal question about my future in the Dharma. And suddenly I got this incredible cramp in my leg, and I had to jump up from the table and walk around, which Lama hardly seemed to notice. And then he suggested I come back the next day. So I think Lama zapped me so I could come back and see him personally the next day. But the main anecdote I wanted to tell was in 1983. I did my first course in 79. I went back in 83, and I was helping a couple of Western doctors with the clinic. It was the last day of the course, the 10th of November, which was, the courses usually ran from the 10th of November to the 10th of December. And the doctors had left. And on that day, Lama gave a 4-hour, and he was in heart failure at that stage. He was grey. And I remember seeing a picture of Vicky McKenzie with him, which must have been the same time virtually that I saw him. And he was quite grey. And he came into the Gompa and he started talking about bodhicitta. I think he may also have given bodhisattva vows, but I can't remember that. And what was his attendant's name at that time? Karuna. So Karuna was his attendant, and Karuna kept trying to encourage him to stop talking, but he wouldn't. And so for 4 hours, he gave this extraordinary discourse on bodhicitta. And one of the things I remember from that course was that he said, if you have bodhicitta, you'll never get lung. And having now spent about half of my life with lung, I remember that very clearly. So that says a lot about my bodhicitta. But anyway, so that night, he gave 4 interviews, one of whom was with me. I think I was the last one, which is, I think, was the thing that did him in, really, because he became very ill that night and was vomiting all night, and then was incredibly ill because of the heart failure. And then early in the morning, Lama Lundrup asked me if I'd come up to the room and bring some medicine for him. And I didn't know what medicine to bring because Rosie wasn't there, and or Ailsa. So in a sense, I ended up spending the day in his room and nursing him and saying, Lama, do this, try and have a drink of water and so on. Not very respectfully, but I was just trying to look after him. And a couple of noticeable things that he said during that day. He said, I knew that I'd get sick by coming here, but I felt that I owed it to my students. Like a true bodhisattva, he was willing to give up his life for his students. And another thing he said during the day was, if I stay here another night, I won't survive another night here. So it was quickly organized for him to fly out that night. Because of his health situation. And I think Venerable Marcel came and saw him and I think organized the flight, although it may have been others. Now in Big Love, as Sandy knows, I think there's an extra day that's been put into Big Love at that time that I certainly can't remember, but it's a long time ago. So my memory is spending the day in Lama's room, and I think lunch was brought for me in the room. Lama couldn't eat and he could hardly even take a sip of water without vomiting. At one stage, a student came in and he got a wooden Buddha statue from the cupboard and gave it to that student. And then towards the end of the day, when it was time for him to leave, he gave me a bonk on the head and thanked me for helping him during that day. And then also, the other thing that I remember during that day was Lama Zopa and Lama Lundrup coming into the room and a number of times and and they were just utterly distressed at Lama's condition and just trying to do everything they could to help him and not knowing what to do. And they were just distraught with his condition during that day, which would have been the 11th of November 1983. And so it was arranged for him to leave. Somebody came in and helped him to put his jacket on and get ready to leave the room. And I remember walking down the stairs with him and surprised to discover that it was already dark, because the day had just seemed to have gone in a flash, an unreal day. And we walked down the stairs, and all the students and the Westerners and the boys, they were all standing around holding incense with candles, and I think some people were crying, because I think people realized that Lama probably wouldn't be back at Kopan after that day. I think there was that realization, and Lama put on a brave face and said, "Don't worry, I'll be fine." And then he got in the taxi and went to the airport and flew off to Delhi. And then the rest of the stories in Big Love, the different hotels and the places, ending up in America and dying in America. So that's the story of that day, an amazing day, the most amazing day of my life. There's one story in Big Love I wanted to mention, which is typical of Lama. This sort of thing mentioned so many times in Big Love, where there were students of his, I think they lived in New South Wales. Kathy will know them. I've got a photo of the lady in the archive. But their little boy had wandered off and fallen in the dam. Do you remember their names, Kathy?
Bill and Gloria. Bill and Gloria Searle.
That's right. And so Bill went down to the dam and dived into the dam, trying to find this little boy, their boy, and couldn't find him, and came up again and was going to give up the search. And he looked across, and on the other side of the dam, Lama Yeshe was standing on the other side of the dam, or an image of Lama Yeshe was on the other side of the dam. And that gave him the incentive, encouragement to go back into the water to look for the boy. And he found the boy and brought him out after about 10 minutes in the water. And a friend of the family came along and said, "Look," and then they tried to resuscitate him, but this friend said, "Look, after 10 minutes, he'll probably be permanently brain damaged and there's really no point to resuscitate him." But they did. And that boy made a full recovery and ended up becoming a lawyer. I think, Kathy, that's right, isn't it, in Big Love? So, and again in Big Love.
Adam was his name.
Sorry?
Adam was his name.
Adam, yeah, it's a good name. And so that's a typical story from Big Love, and one that sticks in my mind. But I don't have a lot else to say. That's just a little bit of my encounter with Lama, and in particular, that last day at Kopan, when I had the privilege of looking after him for that day, I will never forget. So that's all. Thank you. Next.
Pende. I don't know who can follow that. Sandy, would you like to do the reading that you've chosen from Big Love at this stage?
Actually, what I've chosen, sure, I can do a little short reading. What I've chosen actually is something that Nick Rebush wrote for this issue of Wisdom magazine, which was a commemorative edition after Lama passed away in 1984. So Nick wrote an editorial for that. It's only a couple of paragraphs, but to me it really captures how Lama affected all of us. Nick said, Lama Yeshe has gone. No more shall we see his smiling face or hear this familiar, thank you so much, dear. How much he accomplished in the 15 short years among Westerners, his irrepressible energy lifting us up out of our limited concepts to reach for the sky, his kindness melting thousands of hearts and awakening love, appreciation, devotion, and admiration. Yet he is still here. Such was his skill that much of his work was accomplished through his inspiration, not his presence. He would drop into whichever corner of the world his students were carrying out Dharma work, Nepal, India, Europe, America, Australia, and for a few joyous whirlwind days inspire us with teachings, encouragement, scoldings, and personal advice. Then he would leave again for the next stop, the strong impression of these short visits sustaining us until we saw him again. New projects keeping everyone so busy that we would almost breathe sighs of relief that he'd gone before giving us even more to do. Certainly his presence was constantly felt, whether he was there in person or not, and it still is now. So yeah, that pretty much sums it up for me. Just to add to that too, I was sort of thinking about you mentioned Nick already, Kathy, of how he invited you and your friends to Copan. Similarly, Nick was one of the first people in the Dharma who I met. He in Wellington, New Zealand, where I first met the two lamas. And, you know, I was pretty starstruck by the lamas. And at the end of the course, at the end of the 10-day course, Nick said to me, you should go to Chenrezig Institute. They need people. That was when Chenrezig was just like a year old or something. It was 1975. So I travelled across from New Zealand all the way up to Queensland, up the goat track, up the hill. And it really was a goat track in those days. And, you know, ended up at the centre and where Anila Ann was running the show. And she had such a strong connection with Lama. So, you know, we students could really feel Lama's presence through Anne, even though he wasn't there with us at that, you know, obviously. So, you know, she was like, you know, a pour of the guru, just as Nick is, and you, Kathy, and other people too, like Geshe Tinley, Lama's brother, who was our Geshe at Chenrezig for some years in the 80s. You know, I felt really a strong connection with Geshe Tinley as a pour of the guru. So yeah, yeah. When, you know, in the early 80s, I really had no idea that Lama was so unwell. I was very young myself. I didn't really get impermanence, even though, you know, we're told about it in the teachings. I didn't get it. And so when Lama got so sick and passed away at the age of 39, it just came as a real shock to me. And, you know, it was obviously really distressing. And yeah, it seemed like a very untimely death. So yeah. To sum up a few qualities of his that, you know, I saw him as powerful, wrathful, kind, funny, wise, intuitive, and, you know, everything really, all in one amazing being. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Sandy. You reminded me of something when you were just saying that Geshe Tinley was Lama's half-brother.
Yeah.
He was sent to come to Chenrezig. Lama, this is secondhand because this is what Lama told Tom at the time, that he was going to send his brother because he said Geshe Tinley would really suit Chenrezig. He's really laid back. And he was. But Geshe Tinley passed away also at this time. He
Yeah.
passed away the night before Losar. I was in Kopan at the time, and Losar happened to fall on my birthday that year. And so Geshe Tinley was coming over for Losar at Kopan, and we had planned to have a big dinner out at Swayambhu. And then he passed away that night. It was such
that
a
was-
shock.
I know, same. Yeah, when Geshe Tinley passed away, I know. Because, I can remember we were at Chenrezig waving goodbye, thinking, oh, we'll see you, see you soon. And he never came back.
No.
He
It was,
passed on the exact same day on Losar,
well, it was the night before.
the
It was
night
just
before Losar. Right.
evening before
Okay.
Losar. But
Okay.
it was so close. And
Yeah.
I remember the day that I heard that Lama had passed away, and it just didn't register. I mean, I'd been making wind chimes in the dome, and I came out and there was this message from Paul, and I just couldn't quite understand that this had happened. Like you, I knew that Lama had heart problems. Everybody knew that, but it never really occurred to me that he was going to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess we also weren't kept up to date with things. Nowadays we would have been having FaceTime photographs of him
Email,
and videos and stuff all
email
the time.
message. Yeah, exactly. There would
Whereas
be
we
emails
didn't
and
have email then.
yeah, there was nothing
I
like
think I
that.
had my first email in 87. So yeah, it was such a shock, and really did stir everything up. But amazing the way that Lama Zopa took over after that and
Yeah.
was able to hold that strength together. Okay. Who else would like to say something? Ruby, you've had a lot of experience with the results of Lama Yeshe, and you've met Osil a few times, which we have too. Would you like to say a few words? I don't think we've got any sound. That's better.
So the last couple of years before coming to Chenrezig, I did the Vajrasattva retreat, and I used Lama Yeshe's book and sadhana, and that quite a few times I had dreams of Lama Yeshe, and feeling that sense of closeness to him, and I suppose that just that sense that he lives on in his work, and also the experiences of being at a Tisha Centre and with Venerable Gyatso. He often talked a lot about Lama Yeshe, and some really beautiful and inspiring stories. In terms of Lama Osal, he occurs in my dreams quite a lot, and he usually embarrasses me. Things that are some of my shortcomings, he brings them up. So, and I know one dream I had about it would have been about 8 years ago. We're sitting at a cafe, and it was him on one side or me on the other side, and he got the salt and he put it to the side of the bench where we're sitting. It was like, there was some sort of, you're better off without too much salt. And there's another one, I really don't like being ignored. And in the dream, he was with my daughter, and both of them were ignoring me. It was like, so that's how he lives on in our minds. And there was lots of little incidences like that. Some of them were real, and some of them were part of my dream world as well. But Osel, I met him recently in France, and he, you know, he saw my name and he said, "Oh, you're Ruby from New Zealand, aren't you?" And it was like, you know, I don't tell many people, you know, people don't, and I think he might even know my full name, my original name. So it was like his ability to kind of interact with you and know who you were. This is as Osel, was really, you know, it was quite amazing to be around. And then he would just like wrap you up in his arms and just give you the most warm, loving hug. Even though I didn't really feel like I knew him, had much history with him, it just felt like there was some very strong connection there.
Yeah, we're very lucky, aren't we?
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say? Adam? Rosie?
Well, the first kind of experience I had with Lama Yeshe was at a video night at Chenrezig Institute a long time ago, maybe 15 or more years ago. And the first video was one where I think he was in a state of meditation while he was teaching. It blew me away a bit because I hadn't seen anything like that. And, you know, he would say a couple of things and then just lapse into silence, and his eyes would sort of roll up in his head, and and then he wouldn't speak again for a couple of minutes, and then and I sort of thought, what on earth is this? Who is this person? And then you know, seeing other videos of him after that where he had quite a different aspect, I guess, of being very humorous and or being very sort of forceful, and that kind of slightly wrathful aspect. I saw different glimpses of him, and it's almost like even within one piece of footage of him, you get all of those different glimpses of him one after the other. He's always so interesting to watch and so multifaceted. So yeah, that first video really just made me want to find out more about him and who this Lama was.
We used to have people arrive at the centre and they'd never heard of Lama Yeshe, but they'd been having dreams. And they would see Lama's picture and recognise this is the person who had been coming to them in their dreams. I think Mariangela was one of those people, actually. Some of you might know Mariangela. And they'd just go, oh, there he is. I mean, my mother too saw him in dreams.
Yeah, I had really, prior to Lama visiting the centre, I would have really powerful dreams.
Yeah.
And also rainbows, actual rainbows, like not dream rainbows, rainbows in the sky over Chenrezig. Yeah, yep. It was like, wow.
Yeah. They have all these stories in the stories of old Tibet with when the lamas do things and how rainbows would appear and come out of here and do that. And yet this often happened when Lama was around, wasn't it?
Did you see rainbows too?
Yes, they were really there, weren't they?
Yeah.
I think so.
I'm always looking out for rainbows.
I
never see them now like I did then when around the times when Lama was visiting. It was really quite amazing.
Yeah. Well, if there are no other people wanting to talk, are there? I'm looking at your faces, but Ross's face is a bit strange to look at. then we have some beautiful videos. I had a lovely few days going through lots and lots of videos of Lama and picking out what I thought would be really good ones to show in the Gompa this afternoon. So I chose a few shortish, pithy ones and put them in order. There's one of Rabina talking about Lama and his language that is brilliant. And there's another one of Adele reading out part of Big Love, where she writes about the first course that you would have been at, Sandy, in 1975. And Lama and Rinpoche and Mummy Max coming for that course. And when we put them in caravans at the back of the Gompa, which Mummy Max was not impressed with. So if everybody has said all that they'd like to say, I keep thinking of things that I should have said, but we could go on forever. Then maybe it's best to pass over to Malgo to put up those videos, and we can just enjoy watching a few clips of Lama. And there's also a list of the best ones that I picked out. I've made a Word document or a PDF file or whatever comes up. It's linked to the event page on the website, and I think it's linked to the Facebook post, is it, Rosie? So you can go and find those ones rather than go through everything yourself. Although going through everything yourself is a very enjoyable thing to do, I tell you. It's very nice. So thank you to those people who were able to come. I hope you all, the sun is shining here at the moment. It's amazing. I hope you all stay dry and are safe and keep having power. We have some more storms forecast, so look after yourselves. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy, and
Thank
Sandy
you,
and Penda.
Rosie. Pass you over to, is Malgo still there? Okay, over to you, Malgo.
Yes, I cannot speak.
Yes, you can. Why not?
So I added a link under YouTube, under video. On YouTube, there are all links.
So what do we do?
So everyone could just go on YouTube. I could copy the links here also if you'd like. So I just put a link on Zoom.
So we click on that.
Great. Thank you.
And
What?
then we
Oh
have
no, sorry.
very big.
Mhm.
Oh, the
Yes,
bottom one.
Yeah, the bottom one is with.
Oh, good. Great.
Yes, but for all people who will be watching it later on YouTube, then all links are under the video on YouTube. When you see under, then you could find all of them there.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Margot, for setting
Thank
all
you.
this up.